We are starting back into another interview here in our series with Benjamin Carraud. This is in support of this wonderful book that's available, Goodbye Fields of Proshorovka. And we're going to talk a little bit in this episode about those fields. So I want to mention that. Welcome back, Benjamin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yes. I want to talk to start off this episode about Eugen Kunstmann as a person other than a soldier, as just a man in town. Can you tell me what you recalled about that and what came up in your research?
Sure. So I will split those two. I will tell you what I remember first. I remember Eugen essentially growing up, I wouldn't say in poverty, but at least with the looming fear of destitution. What I remember is that the shock of the war, especially after it ended, really shaped him. At the time, Eugen would have been 9 years old when the war ended. Actually, the war ended 2 days after his 9th birthday.
Okay.
And he was then, I don't have much memories until probably early 20s, because then I remember getting into a lot of street fights with the socialists, the communists. I don't know how the Reds. That's how we visualize it.
The Reds. Okay.
Just gang fights. We would like raid their, I don't know, like they would have these political rallies. I have memories of where you arrive and you like shut down the electricity and then you just jump into the ground and you just distribute just to make sure the rally doesn't finish the way it's supposed to. And from then on, I just remember going to a school. And that school, they gave me the atmosphere that there was very little equipment, but we were trained constantly outside, even if it was snowing, always wearing something I remember very well, white tank tops with black shorts, and constantly being outside, constantly being cold or wet, and just forging that. And from then on, it's just army life. I don't have a lot of memories of what happened outside of being in the army. In fact, I don't remember any of my adult family life, which is Eugen was married, and I have zero recollection of that. I don't remember at all.
Okay. And then you did some investigation and you found out other things.
Right. So now let me tell you the story of Eugen Kunstmann, and you can compare a little bit with what I just told you. Eugen Kunstmann was indeed born in 1909. He experienced the First World War. It is unclear now if his father took place or not. I don't remember him taking part in the war, in the First World War. Mm-hmm. That being said, I remember that there was this family push that like the country was in danger and you had to stand up for what was right. And standing up for what was right was making sure that the communists are not in where we are. Eugen is recorded as joining essentially the paramilitary groups. He was part of a youth organization called Bund Oberland, which was essentially street fighters dressed as soldiers. So this is when they started to have the branches and etc. Eugen joined the SS in 1930, so very early, relatively early. He has a SS number in the low 15,000s, so he's one of the early members. And he went essentially from fighting in those like street fights with those paramilitary organizations to being selected to join the very first pool of officers, of cadets, that were to be trained exclusively by the SS. And that was, at the time, a relatively new thing by the SS that changed after the decapitation of the Sturmabteilung. So the SA that helped Hitler come to power was essentially beheaded. Its ranks were incorporated into the Nazi party. And in its place, Himmler, because he was instrumental at the time, managed to create his own school and say, now we're going to have a standing army of troops at disposal, which was called the SS Verfügungstruppe, which was the available troops in a way you could say. And Eugen was a part of that very first push. So he was trained in an officer school in Bayern. He graduated in 1935 and he stayed as a lecturer. So he helped train the next generations. And that period was extremely formative because there Eugen met essentially everybody that would matter in the Waffen-SS in the next 10 years, basically. Because everybody from top leadership, I'm talking corps level, so above division, were also at this school, and Eugen made a relationship with all of them, which would serve him a lot in the future, especially in Russia.
Yes.
And then essentially Eugen had a career, part of the SS VT. So the SS at the time was three things. You had the Allgemeine SS, which was the general administration of the SS.
Okay.
You would have also the Leibstandarte, which was the bodyguard of Hitler, a very unique organization.
Oh, okay.
The SSVT, which were all the SS that could march, because that's what we did basically all the time, just marching in parade. And then you had the Totenkopfverbände, which were the concentration camp guards. So
Okay.
again, right from the start, was from the core of what was seen to be later the army part of the SS.
Okay.
He was rotated between all the different regiments or battalions. So in the north, in the south, he was in Hamburg, he was in Bayern for a bit. And his first action was taking part in the Anschluss in 1938. So he, with his regiment, with his battalion, he was sent to Austria. Then the Anschluss happened, and then they just essentially just came back. So it was a fairly simple affair, if I must say. Nothing like 1939 when the war actually started. And then Eugen was part of the SS Standarte Deutschland, and he saw some very heavy fighting in Poland. He earned the Iron Cross there, but he also got his very first taste of combat, which is not something I remember, by the way, because the first fighting I remember is in the Netherlands. I remember fighting in the Netherlands, which is actually something Eugen did in 1940 when his regiment was essentially sent first to the Netherlands to capture some cities, and then they fought all the way to France. And I have some memories of the fightings in one city in France, and Eugen is recorded as being forward of the advance guards, which is what I remember. Because I remember somebody shooting at me and being like, for the first time, the bullet was very close because I think the bullet ricocheted and zipped and hit right behind me. And I was with another officer, and we realized, okay, like this is serious. We could get hurt here.
Yes.
But this was up until 1940, the trajectory of Eugen Kunstmann was relatively simple. He was a company commander. He was relatively esteemed to the point where his assignments started to take him more and more towards staff duties. And he was made essentially the quartermaster of the very first SS division. So he was a busy man. And when the Reich division, which became Das Reich in the future, was sent to Russia in 1941, Eugen Kunstmann was their supply officer. So he had a huge amount of challenges, constantly essentially fixing issues with logistics and fixing also issues with the resistance that was starting to appear behind the lines, because the Soviets had a lot of stragglers left behind. Eugen was commended for that, to the point where his next assignment was being sent to SS Division Nord, who was fighting in Finland at the time. And that was a much more quiet time. This is not something I only remember one scene, actually two, from that period. One is a moment of despair on the front line because Eugen started to have, I remember, some psychological issues at the time. Because the war was starting to take a direction and officers on the ground, I think if you had a view large enough, you realize that this is not a fight that will only end when one of the belligerents is out of bodies to throw in the battlefield. And that was obviously a huge concern for German officers because the amount of casualties that the Soviets were taking were huge. But there was always replacements, whereas for the German army, replacing an officer or replacing an NCO is much more complicated.
Right.
To bear on Eugen, I remember a troubled relationship with alcohol, which is interesting because I don't drink anymore now. It's just always been this way. And also I remember that this is something that came back to me when I was writing my book, actually. I remember that one of my younger brothers died. And it turns out that his younger brother had died in 1941 during the invasion of the Soviet Union. He disappeared. He was 19. And I remember that this younger brother had joined the SS because of my example. He was 10 years younger. And all this together led to one incident that happened in 1942, in the late summer 1942, where Eugen was responsible for a very violent brawl in a tavern where another officer of the Wehrmacht, not SS, was injured, and Eugen was seen as the biggest agitator. So I found this letter actually to support that claim, a letter from Himmler that I printed in full in my book, that actually explains that Eugen is to be punished for his action and therefore sent be a commander of a fighting unit. Himmler said that Eugen would be sent as an infantry battalion commander. In reality, it happened differently. Eugen was sent to the newly reformed Totenkopf division and became a commander first of their battalion. And as the division was deployed in the east, he became commander of the armored regiment. So he was commanding all the tanks of the division, essentially.
Oh, wow.
All the way up until his death.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So he was on track to be a staff officer because in Finland he was chief of staff of the division commander. So you're not really expected to be leading like
No.
battalions or companies at this level. It
Yes.
happened as a punishment, and that
Oh,
essentially. And an interesting thing is that 95% of the things I remembered spontaneously before my first regression were from that period in that last division
okay.
in the Totenkopf because it
Okay.
was notoriously more brutal.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Eventually, find that there were people who had similar situations and written books about them. Specifically,
Yes,
um,
Stefan
um,
Alix.
yes,
Hmm.
yes, Stefan Alix. And tell me, how did your discovery of that book and that person, how did that affect your work?
Yeah, I have eternal debt. I'm going to light a candle for him every year until I die because he helped me out a lot. He helped me out two ways. This gentleman first made a documentary, I think in 2000. I saw it in 2016, but I don't remember exactly when it was made. And he covered three individuals who had cases of past life memories, one of them
Okay.
being the young James Leininger. So this journalist already at the time opened the door for me because thanks to that documentary, I started to realize that there could be an explanation to my troubles.
What a relief that must have been to think that perhaps you're not
Life
insane.
changing.
Yes.
Life changing.
Yes.
Life changing.
Yes.
It's a lifeline that I really, in all humility, I hope my book can be the same. I hope my book can end up in the hands of people who are going through that and say, hey, like, it's okay. It's definitely a rare experience. I don't expect to receive a million messages of people saying they've gone through the same thing. But for those who do, because it happens, I hope they
Yes.
realize that they're not alone. Because it's a strange experience. Like it messes with your sense of identity.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So you ended up learning that Stefan Alix had started a foundation
Yes.
involving that
Oh,
consciousness. Can you
yeah.
tell us
Oh
about
my goodness. So I reached out to him because I can't remember how I found out about it, but about maybe 5 days or 6 days after my regression, I find that he's just published a book about his past life memories. I'm like, what is going on? So I never bought a book that fast. I rushed
that?
straight to the closest bookstore. They had it. I bought it. And the same evening it was read cover to cover.
Oh,
And he actually remembered being a SS of the same division I was in. So
same division. Wow.
same division. Completely different time period. We probably never crossed paths because for intricacies that I would not get into because it's boring, the odds of them crossing paths is
Yeah.
non-existent. But they ended up serving into the same division. And of course, I was completely blown away. The trajectory that he followed in his book is quite different than mine in the
Hmm.
way that I'm not aware of him having spontaneous past life memories before he went on a retreat
Hmm.
and meditated and he just came. My way was different because mine was just purely
Yes.
spontaneous. I wasn't meditating. And also, he seemed to find closure by going back to the place where he died and did this whole ceremony there, which is not something I felt the need to experience, strangely. I care very little, actually, about what happened to Organ's mortal remains, to be frankly
Hmm.
honest with you.
Hmm.
But it was obviously a very warm feeling. And as I searched about the guy, I found that he had essentially created a foundation that is designed to help people who have not only, but also to give support, not just in rhetoric, but actually give resources for people who are going through extraordinary experiences. I reached out to them and I was put in touch with a psychologist who was extremely kind, who also obviously made the immediate connection with Stefan Alix's story and who also advised me she gave me a list of criteria I should incorporate in order to find my next therapist. And I did. And this is how I find my next one. So in many ways, he helped me in a lot of different milestones of my life. So I have to give credit
Yes.
where it is due. I am glad
Yes.
that this gentleman did what he did.
And did you continue on with your therapy there after that?
Yeah, we had a few sessions. I didn't want to do another regression. I don't know if I said it openly, but I was not looking for that. I was looking for actual support and therapy,
Yep.
which is what my next therapist gave. 100%. He was an incredible man. He's a man that I think he's had multiple lives, and I'm not talking from the reincarnation point of view. I'm meaning in
Mhm.
his present life, I think he's done just
Yes.
like you, just like he's had different things. One of the
Yes.
things he's gone through, which is something he explained to me later on, is he went through the experience of remembering his past life. However, I remember the experience of being, if I say it this way, I was the man holding the rifle. He would be the man standing in the sights.
Oh,
He
oh,
remembers being a Jewish child who was shot by an SS soldier.
oh my goodness.
So you can imagine the exchanges we had were extremely deep, especially since he showed me
I
so
know.
much compassion. Sometimes you want people to show, not by explaining, but just by showing you a role model of this is what somebody who's been through the experience and who's accomplished looks like. Like
Yes,
it's a physical living experience that it definitely, I'm not saying it made his life better, but I'm saying he has become an accomplished human being despite that experience.
yes,
And that was very important for me to be able to meet somebody. And
right.
also, it sounds strange, but it was a man. And my previous therapist was a woman. And I think I
Mhm.
was much more able to project myself with another man than I was with a woman.
Okay.
This is something I realized relatively recently. And yeah, this gentleman changed my life. I ended up having a regression with him, but he had no taste for, let's say, tourism of the past and getting me more images and things. Actually, the only image I remembered from that regression was the moment I was on this front in Karelia in Finland, fighting the Soviet Union in just, it's just nothing happening there, and just feeling completely deflated by the perspective of fighting an endless war. That was very important for me to
Mhm,
remember
mhm.
that during that regression because it gave me a very human side to latch onto. Where Eugen, for the first time, I remembered Eugen had moments of doubts while he was alive. And I needed doubt. I needed a
Mhm.
crack in the armor. I needed to see that even then I was still human. That was important. That's the only thing that
Yes.
Daniel allowed me to see. For the rest, we did a lot more introspective work. I talk about it in my book. If you don't mind, I will stay a little bit
No,
shy about it now because this is something that
that's
usually makes me very emotional.
that's
But
fine. That's fine. That's
but
fine.
I think I released something then. I released something. I felt cold actually for a week. I felt like some energy had left me, and
I see.
I don't really know what to make of that, but it happened. And ever since, I had a much more relaxed, like less sense of urgency.
Oh, good. That was good though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But for 30 days, the door was open, and I had a lot of spontaneous memories then, a lot less
Mhm.
after. I still had some, but they were less
Right.
important. So that's how my life changed. It's never a lonely road. And I say this to those who are listening. I'm going to speak directly to the camera, but if you're going through this, I really encourage you that remember that this is not supposed to be a lonely road. This was never meant to be a lonely road. Don't hesitate to reach out. There are people who will support you, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through friendship, whether it's just a sense of kinship. Don't keep it in. Bring your light, and it just makes the bonfire brighter. That's it.
Yes. Very kind of you.
Mhm.
One aspect of that I think came out somewhat in your second regression was the fact that one side of him was total unfeeling and capable of doing horrible war things. And the
Mm.
other side was a man saying, wow, there's something wrong with all this. It's in the same person. And so I think it must have been very difficult for you to have been able to experience that, begin acting very, I would say, almost animalistic in killing and that sort of thing. And there was one event that happened where there was someone who was captured, was a young enemy agent or whatever that was captured. Did you want to talk about that or no?
I think if I want to talk about it, I would talk about it from the perspective of the intermission, if you don't mind. I have no taste for the gory details, so I will skip over them.
Okay. Oh,
But that being said, I think it's an interesting thing because, strangely enough, those darkest moments were the most helpful for me. And if you don't mind, I would like to dive a little bit deeper about what happened after I had my second regression, because
please do.
about 2 or 3 weeks after, I had a very important night in my story.
Yes, please do.
I thought I had just resumed my life. I had found a job that I worked very hard to get, basically worked my way into a company creating a position tailored just for me. So I was just happy. And 3 days in, I have this awful night where I couldn't sleep because I had these just very spontaneous flashbacks that came. But They felt like I was laying down on a beach, and there was waves crashing and
Okay.
crashing.
Okay.
And basically, I remembered what happened after those last stragglers left the battlefield, and
Yeah.
I stayed alone.
Yeah.
During that night, I remembered this period, as I explained. It's a life review, but in a much longer time frame. Because so I was on that space. I stayed on that battlefield. Once the battle had died down, it felt like the night fell and the sun never came back. And I felt extremely isolated there. Basically, there was just nothing
Okay.
to do. There was this sensation that the distances didn't matter anymore because there was nowhere to go to. It's like the best prison you can conceive, because you try to walk 100 kilometers in a direction, you look down, you realize you're still in exactly the same spot.
Okay. Okay.
So very quickly, looking outwards become meaningless. So therefore, you start to have a more inward look.
Yes.
And what I remember is I went through a process of re-experiencing time and time and time again a lot of very important moments of my life. And
Okay.
those including, strangely enough, and I think it's an important thing to say, whether I witnessed something and did nothing, or whether I did it myself, the guilt was the same
Okay.
whatsoever. But I was confronted to a lot of scenes of chaos that I created, and one of them was the
Mhm.
scene of this little kid. And now I would like to go in detail. I remember that we had caught this kid laying mines, and you interrogate him, of course, and you're thinking, "What an idiot! Why did he get himself caught?" But there's nothing really new you can learn from him. We know there is pockets of resistance deep inside. He's probably not going
Mhm.
to be able to be willing or able to tell us where it is. It's fairly routine. He has to be executed. This is the guidelines. And I actually found the orders that were given at large to the commanders on the ground. They had ample
Mhm.
discretion to be able to pass on the judgment and execute the prisoner on the spot if they were deemed
Okay.
to be irregular combatants. But this is exactly what happened. I ordered this kid to dig his own grave, and he started sobbing, and he's trying to. It's sad. It's sad because there is this air of disbelief when you tell somebody that they're going to die, and you don't even have to say it. They know where it's going, but they are looking for just a shred of humanity to latch onto around the faces present. Very quickly, they give up. So they turn inward or they cry out, but not to you. And I got a bit fed up with that. So I said, all right, enough. It's deep enough. Somebody bound his hands behind his back. I was maybe 3 meters behind. Somebody passed me a rifle. I popped the safety with my thumb and aimed the base of the skull, and he dropped. And that scene came back a lot, obviously, peeling a lot of layer of lies. For instance, why did I do it? Huh. The first thing that came to me in my regression, because my therapist asked me, why did you do it, Benjamin? And I said, so my man wouldn't have to do it. But that was a lie. That is something I remembered during that night. I remember exactly why I did it. I had joined a company of killers, and they had never seen me dirty my
Oh.
hands.
Oh.
So the idea popped into my mind that the next guy that needs to go, I'm going to take care of it. I would take command of the execution, and I will pass the sentence. And all the men around will know that their commander gets his hand dirty just like everyone else. Because contrary to what you might think, not a lot of people enjoy shooting people in the head. This is something that is fundamentally dirty. It
Mhm.
is extremely personal, extremely
Right.
personal. Whether you like it or not, it stays with you. Which is why when I remembered the thing the first time, all I could give you was not even emotions, because I didn't really have any, to be fair, but visually, the aspect of a human being dying like
Mhm.
that is something that is traumatic, deep.
Oh, yeah.
So nobody wants to do it. But I did it for extremely selfish reasons when you think about it, to confront that. This is something that you confront when you are in this state, this intermission state where
Yes.
there is no hiding. And it's strangely enough, I don't see it as a punishment. I never felt like I was being punished. I felt like I was forced to own what rightfully belonged to me. But owning such a moment, it means you're no longer the puppet. You see the strings pulling on
Mhm.
everybody while we here, while he is here. Because this is things that you remember as well, like his mother, how old he was. All these things are things to understand. Also, the perspective can change. For the first time I saw his eyes, I saw his face just before I was about to shoot him. By the end of the experience, of course, because I was detached enough. The consequence of such a night were very, very powerful for me, of course, because I think it taught
Yes.
in one night I really learned a lot about the human soul. about
Wow.
the weight of forgiveness, what it means to forgive, what it means to forgive yourself, what it means to also be a man, be a human being, and facing the consequences of your action. Strangely enough, it affected me now in the way that now I'm much more aware of the reach of my actions, both positive and negative. A bad word can
Okay.
ruin somebody's day. A good day can uplift somebody in ways you don't know. And
Right.
these are things I realized because I realized that the ripples that you leave on the ponds when you throw a rock. This is what happens in
Right.
life when every action you do is like you throw a rock in a pond. The ripples,
Yes.
they can travel very far. It doesn't
Yes.
matter if they're
Yes.
strong or not. This is something I realized because you see all the ramifications of your actions, the things you say or don't say. At the end of this process, I remembered being identityless. You don't really exist where you are. You're just there. You don't have hopes anymore. You're just existing. There's no sense of past or future. You're just in the now. And that is when I felt like somebody came to get me, basically. I noticed three beings in my little world. What were they doing here? I don't know. When I saw them, I realized that they came for me.
Let me hold that discussion of that
Yeah, sure.
to our next interview. But I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about the fact that this process, that where you were there on the battlefield, and it seemed from talking before and from reading some in the book, it seemed like that this seemed like it was endless. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
That your time there just kept you kept you
Course.
just thought you were going to be
It's
stuck there forever.
yes, but again, it loses its meaning because the fear of staying there forever only matters if there is a future. The the
Oh,
the
okay.
the the concept of
Okay.
staying there didn't really seem like something I was worried about, to be fair. I never had
Okay.
a sense of, "I'm stuck here, I will never leave, nothing else will happen." I remember it mostly as a very peaceful state where you are just
Whoa. Okay.
existing. There is no something I hope I will develop after, hence why when she offered me to come back, I didn't want. Why would I
Yeah.
leave this state of nothingness? It's not blissful, but at least it's not painful.
And you weren't worried about like during human life, you are taking actions that have ramifications, positive or negative. And in this existence where you were, there were no actions to take, right? You just
No.
were existing.
Yeah. Yes, it's a state of nothingness, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a sense of self, but no sense of identity. I don't know if that makes sense. You see what I mean?
Yes, I understand. I
Mm.
understand what you're saying. And that was okay. And you were going to just hang out there. And let's take a brief break and come back and talk about what happened while you were there in that state. And something did happen. Okay. Thanks.